All right, everybody. How are you doing this evening? I hope everyone is great. I'm so excited to be sharing with you tonight and joining you all on this live webinar done via the cool technology that we all have on our fingertips these days with Zoom, with Facebook. It's going to be an awesome evening together. To get started here, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Andrew Roop, chiropractor, and I'm really looking forward to the chance to share with you all here. Let me just get a couple things right here on our broadcast. Perfect. Got to make sure that I'm actually going out to you all because that would be a shame. Okay, so as we were saying, I'm Andrew. I'm a chiropractor. Really looking forward to this evening. What we're passionate about here at Thrive is helping families really reach their full potential, helping kids be at their best. And I know that's what you're all about as a parent as well. So I'm going to ask for your participation here. I know we're not sitting face-to-face, knee-to-knee like we sometimes are for these workshops, but you're tuning in online, either live with us now, tuning in, a couple of days later, watching this replay. What I want to know is if you're listening here with us and you have a child that's maybe they've been labeled or diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, ADHD, maybe you just feel in your gut that something's not quite right. You feel like they struggle a little bit more in school. Maybe they've dealt with chronic illnesses, ear infections, asthma, allergies. You just know that they're not reaching their full potential. If that's you, go ahead, give me a thumbs up, raise your hand, anything like that on our Facebook Live page here. And I'll be doing my best to tune in and check with that in your comments and interactions as well. Another question for you parents there. If that's you, who here as a parent would do whatever they could, whatever it took to help their child be at their best, reach their full potential, and really maximize their abilities? I already know without even asking. I don't need to ask for a raise of the hands or anything like that, because as a parent, the fact that you're tuning in here tonight, that's what you want, right? You want to do anything you can for your kid, whether that's leaping tall buildings or anything else that Superman does, right? So we know that's why you're here tonight. We know that's why you're tuning in to help get answers and help find solutions for your child in their situation. So I cannot thank you enough for that, because that's what we're all about too, and that's what tonight's going to be about. So you probably heard me introduce myself as a chiropractor, and you might be thinking, okay, my child doesn't have neck pain or back pain, and they're not dealing with headaches, so why is a chiropractor talking about this? I know that might be a little confusing up front, and that might be what you first think of when you think of chiropractor, or maybe the concept of a pediatric chiropractor is new to you entirely. Hold tight. We're gonna make sure that makes full sense to you by the end of this evening. But honestly, as much as I'm here as a healthcare professional, as a chiropractor, I'm here as a concerned human being. Right? What's taking place in society with our kids is not okay. It's not something that we're okay with personally or here at Thrive and what our mission is all about. So that's what we're trying to do, whatever we can to change that and create a brighter future for those children and for those families. So I can't say I fully understand or get what you're dealing with, because I don't personally have a child that's struggling with ADHD or sensory challenges or, having meltdowns and notes home from school. Our 1.5-year-old is definitely a handful sometimes, and we've really excited to have another one on the way here. But that's not our everyday life, so I can't fully understand what you're going through. But what I can tell you is that I do truly care about what you deal with. I know the burden that puts on that child and the rest of the family, because that's what we deal with and interact with every day in the office. And I can tell you that we care. Everyone at Thrive cares about your family and really helping them reach their full potential. So no, I'm not a psychiatrist or pediatrician, can't prescribe medications or drugs to address the challenges that you're dealing with. But honestly, I can do what I think you're here for. And that's not just share my opinion, but share facts, share science, share research, and really connect the dots as to what's going on, why it's happening, and the most important part, which is what we can do about it. Like we're going to talk about tonight, it's great, knowledge is powerful, but it's actually taking action on that knowledge that leads to a difference, leads to an impact on your family. So it's going to be an awesome evening together. I cannot wait to share this information with you all. It's going to be powerful, life-changing, impactful information, but at the same time, I want you to know that this is a casual conversation, right? Feel free in this forum, as we're on Facebook Live here tonight, ask questions, interact. If you're hearing something that doesn't really make sense, it's different than what someone else has told you, bring it up. If that's coming later in the presentation, I'll mention that. If we'll, we need to step aside and answer that question personally, we'll do whatever we can to make that happen. So let us know. what thoughts you have as we're going through this. Let us know if some of the stuff that we're describing, especially as we get into the perfect storm work, if that sounds like what your history is and what you've dealt with your kid, definitely chime in there and let us know, oh my gosh, this like you were there for my child, right? We've heard that from parents so many times. But want to make sure that you know that you're free to interact, ask questions, and join with us here tonight. So first thing here, just a little bit about us in the office. Like I said, my name is Dr. Andrew. Thrive Chiropractic, where I'm coming at you guys here from, is a pediatric and prenatal focused office here in Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania. My wife and I grew up in this area about an hour away here north of Pittsburgh and Katanning, in Freeport for her. And we are a family focused people ourselves with, like I said, a little one and another one on the way. And we love having a family focused office because it gives us a chance to interact with the amazing families in our community, right? And the ones that live directly around and surrounding us here in our little community. So that's what we're all about. Let me throw up our slide here. As I was going through chiropractic school, working with families, specifically kids and kids that are struggling with any sort of sensory challenges or neurodevelopmental challenges, has always been a passion of mine. So yes, we've done all the training. There's all the degrees, the certifications, the letters after your name. It's important because that shows that, yes, this is something that's important to us to care about. But honestly, I make this joke a lot of times that more letters after your name probably just means that you owe more people more money. What really matters is the experience, the learning, the sitting knee to knee with families, listening to moms, making those connections and seeing the results firsthand. And that's what we've been blessed to be able to do in our office personally, as well as with the group of doctors that we work with around the country and around the world. So really, when it comes down to what we're all about, we could summarize it as this phrase, right? Kids are meant to be happy, they're meant to be healthy, and they're meant to thrive. And sadly, unfortunately, that's not taking place. If it were, we probably wouldn't be here talking tonight because we wouldn't have anything to talk about. If we really think back to growing up, what life was like, it could kind of be boiled down to two rules, right? One was, at least for a previous generation or older generation, first rule was don't call other kids names, because that's mean, that's rude, that'll get you bullied around on the playground. And the second rule from our parents was don't do drugs. Life was simple, right? Pretty straightforward. Don't call kids names, don't do drugs. Unfortunately, as a society, we're really failing at those right now because one, we've got a lot of names, right? We've got a whole laundry list of labels and diagnoses and everything like that. Yes, they can be helpful and they can be beneficial, but they don't always relate to what's actually. So to me, they're not getting at the heart. So on one hand, we've got the failing at that, and goes hand in hand that we're not really doing so well on the don't do drugs. Each of these labels has, 2, 3, 4 medications. Try to help address those. This isn't in any way a anti-medication talk or anything along those lines. That's not personally or about or what the office is about. But the important point here is that we need to realize that is the therapy, is the approach addressing the cause of the issue, or trying to treat and manage the symptoms. Our degree, DC, stands for Doctor of Chiropractic. I really think it should stand for Doctor of Cause, because that's what we're all about, is trying to figure out why these challenges are taking place with your kid and your family and what we need to do to get them to a new place. So obviously something's not right? We're not doing well with these two rules. We're all joining here tonight. So what are we going to do about it? Plan for this evening, which is not going to be, we're not going to be still talking here at 9, 10, 11 o'clock here, don't worry. 3 things: hope, answers, and help. You get a lot of information, and, Dr. Google these days can provide a wealth of information, some of it great, some of it not so. So we're not going to go over as much of, the informational perspective and stuff you should know, and in fact, what we really want to do is take the information that you already know and look at it from a different light, right? It's not necessarily anything new. It's just connecting the dots and showing you why that means what it means, the science that backs it up, and the experience we have in the practice, analyzing and addressing those sort of challenges. So we're really going to focus on steps 2 and 3 here, providing answers And really, the most important part is the action steps. Like I said earlier, I'm a self-professed science nerd, and I love learning, I love studying, I love books. But the reality is knowledge isn't power in and of itself. Knowledge is just potential power. It's actually taking action on that knowledge that leads to a change that impacts your life, whether that's you personally and changes you want to make as a person, as a human, or the changes that you need to put in place for your kids and for your family to be at their best. So this is what we're going to walk through. To get started, I have an awareness test for everyone joining us here tonight. Focus, listen up here. Let me make sure our volume is set up appropriately. Good. All right.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make? Go! The answer is 13.
Who got the answer?
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
That's really the important question. You back it up.
Go!
So right there, the middle of your screen, guy in a bear suit, moonwalking across the screen. Probably not honestly doing that too bad of a job for it. This is our point here with the silly video. I hope you got the right answer. I hope you guessed 13. But more importantly, did you see the moonwalking bear? Most people, when the first time through this, they don't see it because you're not looking for it. You're focused on something else. And it's easy to miss something when you're not looking for it. Like I said, what we're going to go through here tonight is not necessarily new information, but it's information that's presented in a different light, in a different way, and connected in a different way. That's going to lead us to some answers and some action steps. So let's jump straight into what we're talking about when we use this term. What is the perfect storm? As this hits your screen here, it's probably a little bit of overwhelm because you see stuff scattered around, anything from pregnancy to sleep to colic, antibiotics, tonsils, and adenoids being removed, constipation, just a whole mess of conditions, labels, diagnoses, life experiences. What the heck is this all about? The perfect storm, if we had to summarize it, is a child, an individual who is living their life stuck in a stress mode, stuck in a survival fight or flight mode, right? You can maybe think back to your old high school science classes and you learned about your fight or flight sympathetic nervous system that was, like your caveman was at the watering hole. He saw a saber-toothed tiger, and what did he have to do? Fight the tiger or run away. That's our survival mode. The other side is what works on our digestion, our immune system, our rest and growth and development, and all these good things that we want to be focused on. The reality is most of us, and especially most of our kids, are living life in that sympathetic fight or flight survival mode. And that's what we call the gas pedal mode. We'll explain more about that here. And so these images or these words and these terminologies that you see on your screen, that is what we're talking about with the perfect storm. Really, if we have to walk through this sequentially, which I think would be beneficial for everyone here, it could be broken down into 4 steps. So let's go through that. First one here, usually this perfect storm process starts out with a stressful, fear-based, intervention-based pregnancy. If any of you have been to a baby shower or anything like that recently, you can probably think back and there was at least one book that the new mom got. And this book, like you can all remember, there's been movies about it. It's What to Expect When You're Expecting. You might not know that the author is actually Stephen King, though, the famed horror film author. Okay, reality is that's not true. But my point is that book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, reads like a horror novel. It's about everything that can go wrong, everything that is about to befall you with this new terrible disease of pregnancy. And it encapsulates our cultures and our society's mindset and approach towards pregnancy, towards that process of becoming a mom. It's very fear-based. It's very intervention-based. It's treated like a disease, like anything else, right? It's not looked at in the light of this is a normal, natural, healthy process that people need to go through. So That's how moms are starting their labor and delivery and pregnancy processes. It's very fear-based. It's very, oh my gosh, there's this whole laundry list of things that can go wrong. How can I ever make it out of this alive, right? Thank goodness for the hospitals that they can kind of slap me in bed and make sure that I get through this situation alive. And what that leads to, this fearful, stressful, intervention-based pregnancy is a fearful, stressful, intervention-based birth process, because they're coming in, the mom is coming into this situation in that survival mode, in that fight or flight, stress, go, go, go mode. As we were just talking about, when you're in that gas pedal survival mode, your body's not doing the normal growth and development and rest and relaxation processes. It doesn't take a whole lot of critical thinking, right? As you're listening here tonight, you can probably think, all right, if my body thinks that I'm being chased by a bear, it's pretty smart. We're pretty intelligent innately. We know that's not a good time to have a baby, right? It's going to be harder to go into a natural labor and delivery process. And that's what we see all the time, is that instead of moms naturally going into labor and allowing baby to come on mom and baby's timeline and mom and baby's terms, we end up needing to intervene. Maybe that's in the form of epidural, C-section, forceps, vacuum extraction, doctor's hands pulling on baby's head and neck. Whatever it is, baby is having a rough start to life. And this is really where our first big missing piece to this puzzle comes in, is this right in the center of your screen. You can see there above that perfect storm label is traumatic birth. That's such a big piece to this puzzle. I'm going to go out of actually our screen share here for a second to talk a little more personally with you all here tonight. Traumatic birth processes and intervention-based birth there is such a big piece of this puzzle that we need to explain what we really mean by that. If you're a parent listening, tuning in here, if you've ever dealt with a little one, you know that they're fragile, that they're delicate, right? I'm sure you can all remember as your newborn's meeting Grandpa or Uncle Joe for the first time. Maybe you know that they want to hold the baby or they want to be involved, but you're not super excited about that. You know they're not great with babies. They haven't held one since their kids were that age. And so what are you doing as you're handing that precious newborn bundle of joy to Grandpa? You're saying, okay, careful, protect the head, hold the head, watch his neck, protect his neck here, because we know intuitively that newborns have these tiny little bodies and these huge, ginormous, cute heads that they can't support yet on their own, right? Their musculature is not able to support and stabilize the bones, the ligaments, the neurology, the nervous system there. So it puts them at a weak point, and it means we need to add some extra care and TLC for them at that point. Unfortunately, what we know as a parent, in the seconds after birth, kind of gets lost during the actual birth process. And instead of being careful and gentle with this neck, we end up grabbing it and using it as a lever as we're pulling out of that birth canal. So maybe that's the doctor's hands pulling out of the birth canal. Maybe that's vacuum extraction, grabbing onto the back of the head. Maybe that's forceps, using those giant salad tongs to grab baby. But what ends up happening is there's a pulling and twisting and turning that takes place. It causes significant damage on that infant's spine and nervous system in a very crucial spot at that top part of your neck. This area is so important. We'll expound a little bit more in a minute here, but this is such an important area of your spine because it controls a lot of those calming, rest, relaxation, digestion, and growth and development modes that we need to be focused on. That's controlled in large part by our vagus nerve that runs through this top part of your neck. So we could go way off the deep end with the science and neurology there, but suffice it to say that when injury and birth trauma takes place, specifically at this top part of the neck, it pushes kids into that survival stress mode instead of a thriving growth and development mode. So that's really our second big step in that perfect storm. That stressful, fear-based, intervention-based pregnancy leads to a stressful intervention birth with the birth trauma as a big part of that. Ultimately, another thing we need to point out here is please don't hear us wrong saying that, oh, well, our birth community, our OBs are the worst people then, because that is absolutely not the case. They do an amazing job of making sure that mom and baby make it out alive, that they're at their best, and they make that their priority, and that's perfect. There's just a disconnect between what they see as going through the birth process, making sure baby and mama make it out of that alive, But then after that, they're not really involved in the health and the well-being of the newborn, right? That passes on to the pediatrician, and that's their responsibility. So what ends up happening is the pediatrician, who sees all the challenges from that point forward, doesn't really know much about what the birth process is like. Most pediatricians don't ask about it. You could probably think back to your experience with your child as a newborn. They didn't really care so much about how the birth went, other than maybe what were the APGAR scores or things along those lines. So there's a disconnect between what the pediatricians are seeing with the challenges later in life versus what the OBs and the birth providers are seeing during that birth process, and how there's a really intimate connection between the two. Because what we often see as the next step in this precious newborn's life is they're struggling. They're dealing with, maybe it's difficult to nurse. They can't latch very well. Maybe they've been labeled or diagnosed with torticollis, which means their head kind of spends most of the time looking in one direction instead of freely facing both ways. Oftentimes that leads to a flat spot on the back of one side of your head. So instead of a nice rounded back of your skull, it ends up flattened in one part called plagiocephaly. And some other things that we often see go hand in hand with that birth trauma is anything from reflux, controls all those growth and development functions, you're not really going to be able to do those properly, which is how we end up with reflux, because that vagus nerve is controlling the sphincter that controls the end of your esophagus into your stomach. That's controlling the digestive process. So you end up constipated or gassy or bloated or all these things that we hate seeing our newborns dealing with, because that tension and that stress in their spine, their nervous system is locked in and it's stuck and it's not able to go into growth and development mode. It's stuck in that survival mode. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that, I saw someone there mention we froze. Let me know if we're back live. I'm not sure when that comment came in, but from what I see here now with our stream, it's still looking good. So I apologize if technology is bailing out of us, but like we were saying, that is such an important piece of this perfect storm process, because it is intimately connected to everything else that's taking place. As we go on, that early challenges in life, those nursing, colic, reflux, constipation, for most of those, pediatricians really struggle to be able to offer much help, because the advice is usually they'll grow out of it, right? Maybe they'll give some reflux meds, anything like that. But what the hope is, they'll just grow out of it, they'll move on, they'll get better. Unfortunately, what we see is they don't really grow out of those challenges, they just grow into other ones. And we see those newborn challenges maybe fade away and disappear, but now that 6-month-old or 1-year-old or 1.5-year-old is dealing with ear infections. Maybe it's once every other month. Awesome, thanks for the confirmation that we're all good now. Maybe it's once every other month, and then it's once every month, and now pretty soon you realize you're having a conversation of, hey, we need to go down that tubes route, because that fluid just won't get out, and they're just dealing with time and time again of the inflammation, the redness, the irritation. And you're concerned, right? As a parent, you don't want to deal with hearing loss or, eardrum rupturing or anything along those lines. So you do what any good parent would do and take the advice and try to get your kid help. Unfortunately, that's not really addressing the cause, right? And so what we end up is that stress and that tension, that birth injury remains. And then that fluid just travels down to the back of the throat, and it leads to more challenges. So now we're dealing with tonsils and adenoids and respiratory stuff, right? Maybe you're getting the strep infections all the time because the immune system's not regulated properly. Maybe the tonsils, adenoids are enlarged, and there's breathing challenges, there's snoring. There's a whole host of this perfect storm world, right? So what do we gotta do? Put a hole in one thing first time with the tubes. Next, we gotta start chopping stuff out, right? Tonsils, adenoids, they gotta go, because I don't know if you've ever bought IKEA furniture. We've got some of that in our house. You know how there's always random leftover parts there? our body's got to be like that, right? We've got to have extra parts that can't be there for any reason. So let's just chop them out, get rid of them, and we'll move on. Hope you catch the joking here, because no, those do serve a function in modulating your immune system and keeping us healthy. But reality is, in most cases, those are getting removed. And now our child is dealing with not so much the strep throat, anything like that, but it's maybe allergies, asthma, those bigger immune system dysregulations, and it goes on and on and on. Really, what we see this turn into is the chronic fight or flight stress survival mode is not letting them grow and develop and thrive as they're supposed to. So now these challenges that were in the beginning, maybe more musculoskeletal in nature, right? You couldn't turn your head, or there's the ear infection, turned into a little bit more of an immune system thing. And now we've got our full-blown neurology, our brain and our nervous system stuck in this gas pedal mode. And now it's affecting more. It's affecting anxiety, right? It's the little girl who doesn't want to hang out with her friends because she's worried about what they think about her, worried about what they're saying. It's the little boy who can't sit still and focus in class anymore because his brain's just going a million miles an hour and can't calm down and can't focus and sit still as they're supposed to. And it's these bigger challenges, right? The ADHD, the sensory, OCD, ODD, autism, Asperger's, that whole world of neurodevelopmental challenges and struggles all fit piece by piece from this perfect storm world. And as I jump back to our PowerPoint and our shared screen here, one point that I really do want to make, because now I'm sure you're seeing and you're looking through and you're like, oh my gosh, my kid, they had constipation and then they were dealing with some allergies and they did have some ear infections, but they didn't have these. And you're probably thinking through, like, what from my story am I seeing on that journey or on that path? And in reality is, every kid that we work with, every kid that we deal with in this perfect storm world doesn't have every single one of these things, right? This is the full-blown, all of the above perfect storm path. What we do find is that the more of these that were in place for a child's history or child's development, and the longer that they were there, meaning the earlier that they showed up, the longer it was till they left, the more that we can tell that their system was in this fight or flight, survival, gas pedal, stress mode. And that's our point here. It's not that every single one of these is going to show up in a child. It's that perfect storm path and that message of not living in a balanced, healthy system in your nervous system, but living in a gas pedal mode is what's contributing to all these challenges, right? We could spend hours talking, and we have. I've done ear infection workshops earlier this year. We could talk about how the tension on the eustachian tube from C1 as it rotates is preventing that tube from pumping out the fluid. And instead of the normal drainage, it gets stuck and locked in there. We could talk so much more about each of these. This could be a 2, 3, 4 hour lecture. And I think my wife would probably be rolling her eyes if she's listening, if she's not sleeping yet at 8:30. Because I am, like I said, a science nerd. I do love talking about that. But the reality is, all we need to know from your perspective is that when the brain is disconnected to how the body's working, and when there's that stress, the kid's not going to be at their best, right? That looks differently for each child. For some, it looks more like the immune system. For some, it looks more like the focus, the energy, the bouncing off the walls. We'll talk a little bit at the end here how we categorize them and the patterns that we typically see. But the reality is, it's preventing them from reaching their full potential. It's preventing them from being at their best, and it's preventing your family from having the peace and the quiet, normal life that you hoping for them, right? So that's really our message here with this perfect storm is this is what's taking place. This is what we're seeing. And the reality is, this didn't come from any special textbook or research lab or anything like that. This came from the sitting knee to knee with moms and listening to them over and over again. Dr. Tony, who started this perfect storm work, who I did my internship with in Chicago at his practice, he'll tell a story all the time. I heard him share this message countless times that, this came from sitting knee to knee with moms in their practice, dealing with the older kids, dealing with the ADHD and sensory and focus challenges, and hearing the same story over and over again, hearing the stressful birth leading to the early life newborn challenges, leading to the immune system and everything we just went through, right? And that led to him digging deeper into the neurology, into the nervous system, and really connecting the dots, and then sharing this message with us as other providers who are then able to share it with you as parents so that you can get the help that you need for your kids. So like I said, the most important part of this is the help is what we can do about it. So let's keep moving on so that we make sure we do get to that at the end here tonight. Getting back to our PowerPoint here. So this, what you see on the screen there, that's what we call our gas pedal versus brake pedal. I already introduced that to you a little bit when we were describing those two sides of your nervous system, right? The one is the gas pedal. That's your fight or flight, stress, gas. The other one is the brake pedal. That is your calming, growth and development, rest, relaxation, all the things, like I said, that we want our kids to be spending their time in is that brake pedal calming influence. Being stuck in that gas pedal means we don't get the brake pedal. You can't be in both at the same time, right? You can't be in growth mode and protection at the same time. The three things, the three T's that you see in the middle, that's what's pushing us towards this gas pedal stress mode. That first one there you see on the right, thoughts. That is our emotions. That's our anxiety. That's the stresses. That's what we can kind of voluntarily push us into that anxiety mode. That's more at play for some of the older kiddos. For us adults, and we're our own perfect storm case. A lot of the parents that we deal with in the office as well. They've been through a lot of stress as an adult, whether that's work stress, family, life, money. It could be a million different things, but it pushes our body and our neurology toward that fight or flight, stressful gas pedal mode. Middle one, toxins there. That's chemical stresses. That's the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat, the environmental exposures that we all know about, which as a parent of a kid who's struggling with these challenges, I know that's one of the first things that you probably went to and you found in the blogs and the forums and the podcasts and things like that you've been through, is you've seen all the connections between, when we started using GMOs or Monsanto or this in the water. We can draw the line with any number of those toxins, those chemical stressors, and they absolutely play a role in that because they're pushing us more towards a gas pedal survival mode. I would not pin the tail on donkey, so to speak, with any one of them, but rather it's a perfect storm of factors contributing to kids growing up in that sympathetic overdrive gas pedal state. And then the last T there, trauma. That's the one of the big parts of that is what we were talking about earlier with birth trauma. That's one that goes overlooked a lot of the times because we don't really think about the importance of the birth process with how we develop later in life. Of course, you can think of a million other things as well. Anything from us big kids, us adults, dealing with the car wrecks, the fall down the stairs, the trampoline injuries, to, if we pause everything we're doing right now, went to Funniest Home Videos and watched kid fails, that would be probably your best explanation for why we need pediatric chiropractors in the world, because our kids play hard and sometimes they fall hard and crash hard, which once you get over the, scared aspect as a parent, it usually is somewhat entertaining as well. But you don't have to look far to see all the physical trauma that we're under as well. All of these factors are pushing our body towards that gas pedal, fight or flight, stress mode. Everything that we're talking about here can be put under the header of the nervous system. That's what is running this gas pedal versus brake pedal show. That's what is controlling and coordinating everything in your body. And that's really summarized by this quote here by Dr. Bruce Lipton. And that's the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells. Now, when we're doing this with other people live in the audience, a lot of times, what words jump out to you as a parent? And one of the first ones usually is environment. Another one is behavior, because I think, okay, all the environmental stuff we just talked about. Then I think about behavior, because behavior is really the reason you're tuning in here tonight, right? Your kid's got some sort of behavior, some sort of outward expression that you don't want anymore, whether that's misbehaving, throwing tantrums, not being able to focus in school. There's something going on that you want less of. And those are absolutely what I would agree are the key points of what we're dealing with here. But want to add a little bit of a twist and a tweak to it, because what most usually say is focus on that behavior component. But what we really need to do is go backwards and start with not even just coordination, but perception. Because when we talk about this concept, it's the difference between reading left to right versus right to left. When we read right to left, starting with behavior here, we end up getting the effects, the output, cause, whereas really the behavior is the output, is the effect of whatever the perception is. So this is what we really want to focus on, is that these challenges, these behaviors, these output issues, they're not really output or behavior issues at their root, they're input problems. Because our nervous system, first, it perceives, takes in everything going on around us, and then second, it coordinates. It then has to decide, okay, what information do I need? What do I not need? And then third step there is it acts upon that information, right? It's the behavior, it's the decision that's made. And so the behavior in and of itself is just determined by whatever the perception, whatever the input is. And that's our point here. And that's our focus, is that these issues are more than anything input challenges. Is our nervous system doesn't have the right input coming in. And that's why, as a whole, if we had to lump, we not a big fan of labels and diagnoses, because like I mentioned earlier, that doesn't really tell the whole story. That doesn't tell us why the problem's taking place. But if we did have to use a label to talk about what was going on here tonight, it would probably have to be sensory processing disorder, because that is saying that these are sensory challenges. And that's what's taking place, is we're not able to properly perceive and take in the sensory stimuli that are going on. So what the heck does this have to do with a chiropractor? Why is it Thrive Chiropractic? That is the most important point here, is that so when there's a shift in your spine from some of those 3 T's we were talking about, birth trauma specifically, or other injuries or falls, it leads to that stress system being stuck on. And that's why it's us here talking to you about it. Measure that stress, that gas pedal fight or flight. We can see where there's that shift in that tension in your spine. And then when we take care of that root cause, it leads to the stress being turned off, that shift being taken care of, and balance coming back into that nervous system where it's able to properly perceive. And, the shirt collar that's bothersome to your child because it's just an extra stimulus can be handled now because your body's perceiving it properly instead of this abnormal stimulus. Or the classroom activity isn't overwhelming anymore because there's not an internal bombardment of noise and stress going on. So that's really what we are all about, is finding that stress in your spine, calming that down, because that will bring the overall gas pedal, fight or flight, survival mode tension down and allow your child to thrive and to really be at their best. So maybe that makes sense to you. Maybe you're like, okay, I'm not buying it. I don't see the connection between your spine, nervous system, and what we're dealing with our children here. This, like I mentioned earlier, we could spend hours on, but I want to briefly walk through some of the science that really shows why this is true and how. This on your screen and what you see now, dyskinesia, dysapharentation, dysautonomia, dyskinesis. Spend the next hours Googling them, do whatever you want. But really, there's nothing that is going to help by ending tonight with you knowing 4 new big fancy words that start with D, right? So that's why we want to explain what these mean and how, more importantly, how they affect your child and why that's related to what we're talking about here tonight. So as we're going through that, briefly, that first D, dyskinesia, all that's saying is that there's a misalignment and there's that fixation, right? Dys means bad, kinesia, like you've heard of probably kinetic learner, meaning someone who likes moving more. All that's telling us is that there's abnormal movement, there's something stuck. You're already an expert in that because we talked about birth trauma. We talked about how pulling and twisting at that head and neck leads to injury, leads to strain, and leads to misalignment and fixation in that top part of your spine. It's like if we took a sledgehammer to the hinge of a door, gave it a good couple whacks, a couple things are going to happen. One, the door is probably not going to open very well, if at all. And if it does, it's not going to swing straightly or smoothly. It's exactly what's taking place in our spine, our nervous system. When those misalignments and fixations take place, the vertebrae aren't able to move properly in those joints. Instead of giving good information to the brain, give bad information. We talked about birth earlier in that pulling and twisting. The average amount of pressure and pulling and strain used in that process by OBs per the obstetrician textbooks is 60 to 90 pounds of force in pounds of pressure. I think we would all lose our minds if I took a newborn, grabbed him by the head, and hung a 60 to 90 pound dumbbell from their waist, right? No one would think that's okay. Like I said, not saying anyone's a bad person, But we just need to realize that when there's an undeveloped, fragile brain and nervous system and spinal cord in this newborns, we need to handle that with care. We need to allow them to go through that birthing process as it was designed to be. So that's our first one here, is that misalignment, that fixation leads to being stuck. You might wonder, is this really that common? You're thinking back, I don't remember anything crazy about my birth. Maybe doctor's hands were down there, maybe not. There's some research here. There's a little screenshot of it on the PowerPoint there. You can read it. It's a miracle. I'd gladly send you the full paper or the full link to that, though, if you send us a message or an email. But what that research paper found is that in their study of healthy newborns, meaning they didn't have any challenges, everything was on track from the get-go, the researchers found that 99 out of 100 of those healthy newborns had what they called a strain or a injury, what we would call the shift in the stress and tension in the spine and the nervous system. So they found 99 out of 100, so 99% of the healthy, normally developing newborns did have this underlying birth injury and birth challenge. So yes, it is absolutely common, even if you can't really remember what your birth process was like. Second one here, disafferentation. All that's saying is that's the next logical step in what's taking place. When that misalignment and fixation is there, it's going to lead to abnormal input going up to your brain. Our brains are really smart. They're aware of everything that's taking place. We can close our eyes and touch our elbow and do all sorts of things like that because it's important for survival that we know where we are in space. To do that, we constantly have sensory information or information coming up from our joints into our brain. And that's, you kind of think of it as healthy brain food. Our brain needs that nutrition. It needs that stimulation because it can never rest. It can never not be receiving that. What takes place when there's that misalignment and fixation and stress in your spine is that instead of good brain food, good nutrition, it's getting garbage. It's getting stress. It's getting noise bombarding up to the brain because those signals aren't right. Those signals are sending stress or bombardment of error messages. It would be like if someone mentioned earlier we had technology issues where something was a little bit frozen. It would be like if we were trying to have this conversation, instead of technology issues, we had massive speakers on either side of us here blaring Metallica as loud as they could be. You wouldn't be able to hear me. You would have tuned out long ago. And this wouldn't be a fruitful conversation, right? There'd be a disconnect between what we're able to communicate. And that's what's taking place in these children who their brain is trying to be calm and perceive everything that's going on, is they're getting bombarded with noise and stress into their brain all the time. So that's what we're really leading to, is this misalignment and fixation leads to a bombardment of stress into the brain. Third one here, dysautonomia, is the natural next step as well. So stress is coming in, it's going to mean stress is coming back out. You can simplify that, and garbage in leads to garbage out. And that's what leads to your vagus nerve, that brake pedal, calming growth and development function being turned off. So now we've got the gas pedal going full speed. We've got Metallica blaring in the background, and we've taken the brakes and cut the cord, and our healthy balancing part of our nervous system, that vagus nerve, is no longer functioning as it's supposed to. And that's where we lead into everything we were talking about earlier with the ear infections, colic, asthma, respiratory challenges, sensory ADHD, and so on. So finally, that last D there, dysphonesis, that's where we get to the behavior. That's where we get to the labels, the diagnoses. Like we said earlier, that's not where the root of the problem is, right? The output is only there because of abnormal input. And that's what we've got to really trying to get across here tonight, is that to take care of the output problems, we have to take care of the input coming into the brain. And that's where in dyskinesis, we've got, as I jump back to our PowerPoint here, we've got a couple different labels that we'll use to describe what's going on with these kids. And that's the bottom right of your screen here. Those are drunken bull, raging bull, and creatively drunken raging bull. Those are different ways of describing the categories and the views of stressors. We got a drunken bull. That would be typically more of a case history that had more of the immune challenges, maybe some balance and coordination issues, maybe ADD without the hyperactivity components. Raging bull, that's the typical ADHD, bouncing off the walls, energy, go, go, go. They won't sit still for more than 10 seconds. drunken raging bull, that's really the worst of the worst in the combo of everything, where that gas pedal is maxed out and going into overload, and the brake pedal has really been so shut off, so cut, that there's really no coordination, there's no balance, there's no immune system regulation as well. Depending on the severity, depending on the type of that case, our care plans and our approach is going to differ. We treat a drunken bull differently than we would take care of a raging bull, or a combination of the two. And the way that we really get to determine which of those categories someone falls into and how we can best help is technology. Not only is technology helping us talk virtually here tonight, but it's really what drives what we do here at our practice, using the most cutting edge and current technology to assess what's going on and then make the changes and monitor those changes. So everything that we're talking about, that stress and tension in the spine and your nervous system, that energy, that noise going into the brain, that overall balance between gas pedal and brake pedal, that's all part of our initial exam and initial testing that takes place at the office to really get a full picture of, one, just yes or no, is this person dealing with any stress or tension or misalignment in their spine and in their nervous system? If they are, we want to know where it is, how long it's been there, and what it's going to take to make a change. So that's where we could see different readouts and actually measure, okay, how much stress, how much noise is bombarding into the brain? How coordinated is that information? Are they living in that fight or flight gas pedal survival mode, or are they more balanced? And that's what really gives us the keys and the answers to how we can really help. To put that in a more real sense for you, let's walk through someone's story, someone's case, where we can look at their scans. And this will be kind of what we do as we're wrapping up and letting you go all here tonight. This is Brody. Brody was kind of this combination of ADHD, sensory, mood disorder sort of kid. Mom was exhausted. She was frustrated. And in this picture, you can see here, that's Brody off to the side, kind of standing by himself. Looks alone, right? Doesn't really want to interact, just looks shut down. So Mom, she described herself as exhausted and frustrated and just at her wit's end. She also feels skeptical and shunned because she's been, around the block with her kid, and she's been to every provider, and she's talked to them all, and she's tried more natural approaches, whether it's essential oils or dietary changes, and seen some positive effects, but hasn't really made the massive changes she was expecting. So she's feeling skeptical and shunned and exhausted and frustrated herself. I've seen our comments about name calling here. And what ultimately is the most important thing here is Brady would talk about, he was made to feel different, made to feel that something was wrong with him. He would say, why do I have to ride a different bus to school? Or why do I have to do a different classroom or testing experience, or all these things? He just didn't feel like he fit in with everyone else. And at this point, like I mentioned, they tried everything but medications for him. So what did Brody's initial scans look like? Here is one of the scans that they did, this one of the 3 that we would be doing in the office. Scanning 101 here, give a quick overview. Little white bars is normal. Green is a mild stress. Blue is moderate, and red is severe. As you can see, just from that information, there's a lot of red, there's a lot of color, there's a lot of stress in this scan. Total energy, meaning how much noise and how much brain should be at 100. In this case, for Brody, it was double that. It was at 210. So we can see that there is double the energy, double the stimulation, the noise, the stress coming to his brain, coming to his head that there should be. So it's easy to understand then why, of course, you can't really focus in school, or you can't listen to mom and dad when they're trying to communicate with you, because just when he's at rest, not doing anything else, not having any extra outside stimulus, internally, his brain is just being bombarded with Metallica, with that stress from his own spine and nervous system. So this is what he was at his initial scan. And then a handful of months later, we see the process of calming that storm, calming that stress. So on the right there, Brody's scan was down to a 123 for total energy, which is a great range for a little boy like that. Yes, there's still some color on the scans at this point. Brody wasn't at the end of his journey, but there was amazing changes, amazing improvements taking place. And we could see that there's less stress and less noise and less bombardment into the brain. As a chiropractor, this gets me really excited because I know the impact on growth and development in neurology that having a 210 to a 123 and all the red to the white bars, what that leads to. But I know as a parent, you probably couldn't care less about red bars versus white bars or anything like that, right? What you want to know is, what does this mean for my child? How does this affect our day-to-day life? How does this help them be at their best? And that's what we really want to wrap up with here, is this is what Brody's life is like today. Calm, self-control, able to regulate himself more. It doesn't get overstimulated, doesn't overreact when things go wrong or when there's a change in the schedule or anything like that. As he smiles, he plays with his friends, he's able to interact in a normal way. This we had to leave verbatim in there. She said he does his homework without tearing his shirt off and carving the kitchen table with his pencil in pure act. Eating better, when that sensory stimulation is normalized and not confused. Textures that maybe were bothersome previously are now okay and not an issue. Showing affection, showing love. I mean, what does that mean for our parents? Everything, right? Hugging more, telling them they love you, telling them they care and can interact in more calm ways. And this bottom one really explains our picture. It's part of every element of life. So the story with the picture here on the giant Ferris wheel is that was actually at, I think, Brody's sister's birthday party. And typically, Mom said that is not something that he would have even been at. They would have had to either get a babysitter or someone stay home, because that much stimulation, activity, and excitement at a big birthday party gathering would just be too much. He'd have meltdowns, have tantrums, and it would just be overwhelming. This is him loving life, hanging out with the crew, enjoying the Ferris wheel, just having a great time, which is really what it's all about, is they're able to be boring, basically, right? And that's what we tell our families all the time, is we want to help your life be more boring. We don't want you to have to go to, a ton of therapies every week and be worried about IEP meetings and all these other things. We want to make your life a little more boring, a little more normal, which is what we know that you want for it as well. So really, what's our most important part here? Like we already shared, is that's our action steps. And that's what I want to wrap up with this for you guys. Two things, super simple. One, reduce those 3 T's that we talked about. Do whatever you can to reduce those in your home, in your household, because that's going to lower the burden of stress that your child has. About this tug of war between what's supporting health and what's working against it. The more we can minimize what's working against it, the more we can increase and support what's supporting health, the better chances we have for success are. So that's one. Reality is, because of the world we live in these days, we can never completely reduce that, which is why the most important thing here is that number 2, and that's getting your child's nervous system evaluated and checked, and seeing if these scans show that they're dealing with some of the stress, they're dealing with some of this tension that we've been talking about tonight. If going through that perfect storm message led to a lot of head nodding and like, oh my gosh, that is my kid for you, I really encourage you to take that next step, reach out, and let's figure out if that's what's taking place, if it's as simple as that, right? I know you're wondering, I know you're thinking, could it really be that simple? Could it really be that there's this disconnection, there's this stress in my child's spine and nervous system? Honestly, I can't tell you that right now, because we need to talk more. We need to do those scans, do those analysis. What I can tell you is that we should find out, right? It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't change anything, doesn't move the needle if we end tonight with more information and not any actual change or any action. So that's what I want to encourage you to do. The way that would work for our office, just so you know what to expect, is we offer every patient or new patient interested in learning more about what we do, what we'd call a complimentary consultation. It's a chance to sit down with me, go through basically what to expect, what not to expect, what do we do, what do we not do, what time commitment might look like. Get all your questions answered before you're committing time and money into the exam, into that process. Next step then would be figuring out what those scans look like, right? To go through that exam, to go through the analysis, the case history, the scans, and then going through what we found, sitting down with you in what we call our patient recommendation conference, and saying, all right, this is what your scans show, this is what is going on in your child's nervous system, and this is what we can do to help. All that process is $150 in our office. For joining us here tonight, if you mentioned that you're on the webinar, we'll make sure we get you a gift certificate that takes $50 off of that. So that would bring it down to $100 for that. New patient exam and analysis to give you some answers. At that point, you'll know what's going on. You'll know, is there some underlying hidden stressors in my child's system? And you'll know what you can do about it. But the choice is yours then. You can say, okay, let's do this. Let's make a difference and see what will come from it. Or you can say, maybe another day. But at least you'll know, at least you'll be able to have that information. And like I said, information is powerful, but even more powerful is taking action on it and making changes. So one last check, just make sure that we didn't miss anything on comments or questions here. Now, I don't think there's anything that we can't circle back around to later. So last thing here is just thank you for joining us. Thank you for caring about your child's future and what's going on enough to tune in and to maybe broaden your perspective or broaden your horizon to learn about what's a new thought on what could be taking place and how we can help our kids be at their best. Because like we said from the get-go, what we're all about here at Thrive is the belief that kids are meant to be happy, they're meant to be healthy, and they're meant to truly thrive. When that's not taking place, we know we got to do something about it to get it to there. So once again, thank you guys. Reach out, give us a call, send us a message, and we'll set up a time within this next week here to sit down and answer those questions you have and make a change for your family. Have a great rest of the night, everybody.